I would like to tell you a little bit more why we are doing this panel. And we heard already yesterday that emerging economies become more and more important for low-income countries around the world. Trade between Africa and the emerging trade partners has been growing and accounts already for 37% of all trade in Africa. And China has recently surpassed the United States of America as most important trade partner to the African continent. Furthermore, the African Economic Outlook 2011 predicts incredible opportunities for low-income countries when the emerging countries are moving along with their development and creating more and more middle classes that would be able to create millions of new customers, especially also for labor-intensive goods around the world. And these labor-intensive goods could be produced in Africa. However, this can only work if some conditions are met in the low-income countries. First of all, there should be a vital private sector. And for that the sector could be vital, it should have an enabling business environment in these countries. And this has to be created. Most of you know that in many countries it starts with infrastructure, electricity. It's not well performing at the moment to promote private sector development. A second issue certainly are trade barriers. At the moment, for some countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, it is even more difficult to trade between themselves in the region than it is to trade with China or Brazil. And this is a major impediment for development in these countries. Another point, sorry, I have to sit down because otherwise I cannot manage all my papers. Closely linked to this is foreign direct investment, of course. It is at the moment not growing at the pace it could be and it should be to promote growth and development in low-income countries. But the question with FDI is not only on quantity, but it is also on quality. Because at the moment, trade with low-income countries, especially from Africa, is mainly about raw materials and products that are not very up the value chain, and this should be changing. African countries and other low-income countries should promote growth, move up in the value chains, produce more goods that have a lot of manufacturing included, and they need to become more competitive as well. Well, to discuss all these interesting issues, I think we have gathered an excellent round of experts from academia, from politics, and from the private sector. And I would now like to present you shortly the panel. Let me start with Mr. John Page. By training, he is an economist, and he has been teaching and working at a range of universities in the United States, in Japan, and the UK before starting to work for the World Bank. He has been working for the World Bank for about 18 years. And his posts included being the director of poverty reduction and economic policy divisions, as well as chief economist for Middle East, North Africa, and the Africa region. Now he is a senior fellow at the Brookings institution, mainly working on issues of international development, trade and poverty, but he also works as a consultant to various international organizations, including the Global Development Network, UNIDO, World Bank, and many others. From the private sector, we have Mr. Anant Nadkarni from Tata Group. By training, he is from the business and administration fields, and he is engaged with Tata for 18 years now in different fields like manufacturing projects and auditing. He is currently the Vice President of Group Corporate Sustainability of Tata, and he coordinates social, environmental, and related initiatives with nearly 50 major Tata companies in a larger field of about 100 champions. He partnered with the UNDP to develop the Tata Index for Sustainable Human Development, and we are quite excited to hear more about this, and especially the impacts that it could have to development. Mr. Nadkarni represents Tata in various bodies promoting social responsibility worldwide, including UN initiatives, and he sought also assignments with the Center for Development Studies and Activities in Pune and the Public Affairs Center in Bangalore, where he developed programs in improving the quality of local self-governance. From the political side, we have Ahmed, Mr. Ahmed Nuru from Ethiopia, and he holds a Master in Business and Administration, and he has been training in the UK and Addis Ababa universities. He has been working for a long time for government agencies and private companies, mainly in the transport sector, before occupying his current post as an advisor to the State Minister of Industry in Ethiopia, where he focuses on policy and operational issues related to priority sector industries, state-owned enterprises, and privatization. He also advises the private sector businesses and potential investors regarding business startups, project implementation, and access to export markets. So I think we have really a very nice round to keep discussing. I would like to start with some questions for the panelists before we open the floor to more questions from the audience. Let me start from the little bit more theoretical side on page. I would like to ask you about industrial integration. In a recent paper that you wrote, you said that deep industrial integration is essential. Thank you for much light, more light. Is essential for African development. And you criticized the European Union and other multilateral development banks for not doing enough on this issue. So I would like to ask you a question about what could be lessons learned from Europe, where we had also quite an industrial integration process, and how could they be transferred to Africa? What are promising approaches to deepen regional integration in Africa? Thank you.
Okay. Regional integration is a fascinating subject in Africa because everybody is for it and nobody does anything about it. But it is absolutely critical. If you think about India and you think about Africa, one of the things that emerges very clearly is that despite the sometimes frictious nature of the Federal Republic in India, it's an integrated economy. People move, capital moves, products move across that space. In Africa, in a land area that is slightly larger, but not hugely larger than India, you have 47 borders south of the Sahara. That introduces an enormous amount of friction. When one thinks about trying to break into the global market for industry, and keep in mind that for the past 20 years, Africa has been sitting on the sidelines as this explosion of manufacturing and industrialization has taken place in the developing world, Africa's share of global trade has dropped in manufactured products from 0.3% of global trade to 0.2%. So the question is, what can you do? And there are a number of different areas that one needs to look at. But in the area of regional integration, the specific question is, how would you go about taking this seriously? And are there any lessons from Europe? And the first thing I would say is yes. The first lesson is be practical, start small, and achieve something. One goes back, I'm old enough to remember, that European integration began with an iron and steel community. It began by trying to solve specific problems of integration within industries that were for the benefit of business. It began with cross-border projects that helped to integrate the power grids, integrate the road networks, integrate the rail networks. In Africa, what we have is large pronouncements from places like the African Union, and even the most dynamic of the regional organizations, I would say the East African Community, has begun almost in reverse of what you would expect to see. Instead of starting small, dealing with infrastructure, dealing with trying to solve problems of common management of things like the road from Mombasa to Rwanda, they've begun with a currency union, something somewhat surprising, I think, to people in Europe, given the problems that Europe is having with its own common currency. So start small, be practical, and focus on, in a sense, open regionalism, equipping African firms to be better able to compete by lowering the costs of getting to markets, by lowering the costs of entering value chains, and by accumulating value across countries. Final point. Why did I criticize both the Americans and the Europeans? Because none of their preferential trade arrangements really focus on the question of regional integration. The most disappointing of those, of course, being the economic partnership arrangements that are currently being negotiated by the Trade Directorate in Brussels. It's a partnership without partners, I guess would be the way to put it. Instead of using the knowledge that Europe has accumulated over the last 50 years of how to implement regional integration, it has become a classic trade negotiation in which the negotiators are trying to get something while giving up nothing. That seems to me to be simply, completely working in the wrong direction. There's a lot that Europe could share. They simply haven't tried to share it.
Thank you very much.